G'day, it's Robbie again. Well, you've got your nice little lathe, whether it be Chinese or old school, whatever. And okay, it's a moving machine, it's dealing with a pretty harsh environment, and it's going to be subject to wear and tear. Now, the name of the game is to keep your lathe in as good a shape as possible by regularly wiping it down and oiling it. You know, I would do that 2 or 3 times a day when I'm working, wipe it down the ways and oil them. And, you know, considering how much work this lathe's done, it's in damn good condition, but it has got some wear and tear. Basically, there's some wear on the back ways here, or some marking I should say, because it actually isn't significant as far as tightening up the carriage or anything as you move it across, but there is some marking there. And today I'm going to discuss a subject that a lot of newbies particularly aren't really aware of. We'll discuss a machining practice that can and will damage your lathe ways very easily. Okay, what is it? Well, people get upset about machining using a tool post grinder. You know, if you mention the word grinding on a lathe, a lot of people go into hysterics. They have a tizzy fit, meltdown, and I would never have a grinder near my lathe, it's going to destroy it. Well, guys, if you use your brains and cover up and wipe down after, it's not going to destroy your lathe. But those very same people will then probably go and machine a material that I'm going to talk about today and not even think twice about the harm it's doing to your lathe. And that material is case hardening. Now, I had a comment from a guy the other day, and he said, he got some kingpins from a truck, and he machined it with his little lathe, and using carbide he could get through the case hardening, but it was slow going, and he thought he might anneal the kingpins. I wrote back and said, look, annealing won't do any good at all, because the case hardening is on the outside, it won't anneal. You have to remove it if you're going to use the kingpin. And then I pointed out a salient fact to him about the dangers of machining case hardening. So we'll look at some case hardening and I'll explain what's going on. Okay, here's a range of scrap steel that looks promising, but it's not stuff you really want to mess with. First one here is, even though it's rusty, it's because it's come off the scrap pile. But the first one here is a lathe shaft out of a GM gearbox. There'd be 2 of these in a gearbox. One would be for the main shaft and one would be for the idler gears, secondary set. Now, this is case hardened. This is also high carbon steel. It's not just case hardened, it's super high carbon steel, and this is really no good for anything. Even as a punch, these things can shatter and splinter. Very dangerous stuff to mess around with. So if you've got stuff like this, scrap bin, recycle bin. Kingpin, this is a kingpin out of a who knows what. Once again, nice looking bit of steel, case hardened on the outside. Once again, you've got to get that case hardening off for it to be useful, and then you'll find the steel will be pretty hard. It won't be high carbon like a lathe shaft, but it will still be pretty damn tough stuff. It's usable, but once again, you've got to get that case hardening off, and the case hardening on these things is actually quite thick because it's made to go quite a while, to put up with a lot of wear before it goes through the hardening. So you're talking probably 4 to 5 mil on some of this stuff. Once again, recycle bin. Okay, here's it's a similar head bolt out of a truck, and this is actually also case hardened. Why it's case hardened I can't say, but you can see I've machined the end here and got through to the inner core, which is actually pretty crappy steel, because these things, even though they are case hardened, well, this one is, they're actually designed to stretch a little bit, so the steel won't be super high carbon, but in this case it's case hardened on the outside. Okay, once again, pretty doubtful I'd use that. it probably would make a good punch because it's not going to splinter, you know, so you could grind it down, make a decent big punch out of it. And here we have another shaft. This is case hardened. It's you can see by the look of it, it's got that case hardened finish. This has come out of some piece of equipment. Once again, you've got to get that hardening off. Is it worth the effort? You know, well, that's up to you. The problem with case hardening is when you machine it, it'll do one of two things. It'll either come off in big streamers, or more likely than not, it will come off as flaky chips, and those flaky chips can go down to a microscopic level. And I mean, the thing with the case hardening is, it's actually like little razor blade, like little knife edges, whereas you've got the grit from, say, grinding, that's going to be very, very fine. You know, almost like toothpaste fine, you know, like. So any damage it does, it's going to be like it's like using wet and dry. Whereas case hardening, the chips are going to just basically be like, putting sand on your ways and grinding it backwards and forwards. It's going to just score into the cast iron, and I mean score in really badly. I did a lot of case hardening, turning on a job years ago, and I regretted it after because it did actually mark my ways. So we'll look at what it's done to my ways on my Chinese lathe, and yeah, you can see for yourself. Okay, so here we are looking at the front prism, prismatic way, and the front flat, which takes the tailstock. This isn't an area of the lathe bed, the lathe ways that the carriage rubs on. It's basically, as it came out of the factory, that's the factory finish. You can see there's no wear in there whatsoever because it's never done any work. The front prism, as you can see, is nice and shiny. There's no scoring because the chip guard has done its job, and machining generally throws the chips towards the back of the lathe rather than the front. Anyway, that's in prime condition. All right, let's look at the back way now, where the case hardening chips did some damage. Right, you can see once again, here's the prism, and this hasn't got any wear on it because once again, this isn't a rubbing prism. The only rubbing prisms is the front one, so it rubbed on the front prism and the back flat. You can see on here, in fact I can feel it with my fingernail, you can see the scoring that's gone into that flat way, and that's all been from case hardening, from that one incident when I was doing case hardening many years ago. There is no significant wear in this lathe because Chinese lathe generally, the cast iron in the beds and the headstock is as hard as hell. It's like, you know, it's probably made of depleted uranium or something. It's super hard stuff. If you ever tried to drill a Chinese headstock or lathe bed, you'll find out, you'll know what I mean. It is really damn hard stuff. Now these ways aren't actually hardened as such. Some of them are electrically hardened. These are not, the same as you get with a lot of, you know, quality lathes too. They're not all hardened, you know, South Bend's, Hercus. Most of those beds are not hardened. And they're as soft as butter compared to the Chinese ways. You know, I've seen some shockingly worn Hercus lathes over the years. So, yeah, that's not a problem with the lathe bed. That's all been done with case hardening chips. So there you go. It's yeah, it's nasty stuff. And I basically, if I have got any case hardening steel, I wouldn't never use it on the lathe. And I just thought I'd put up a video to warn people, stay away from that stuff. If you value your lathe and you want to make it last as long as possible, yeah, there's certain things you shouldn't do. And as I said, machining off case hardening, do it at your own risk. If you do it, make sure you cover up with some newspaper or something, or a rag over the ways to keep the shit off of the rubbing areas, because if it gets under the carriage or gets caught up in the chip wipers, in the felt, it will just tear up the surface of your of your lathe. And as I said, it's much worse than grinding, in my opinion. I wouldn't hesitate to grind on a lathe. This lathe has done hundreds of hours of grinding, and it's got no significant wear anywhere, really. The only damage you can see from this thing has all been caused by case hardening. Okay, that's it from me. Just a heads up for the newbies particularly. A lot of the older guys probably know this, but if you don't, well, yep, take my warning seriously. It's not stuff to play around with. Okay, that's it. See you next time. Cheers.